Modern artificial intelligence is often framed as a system of pure mathematical logic. We view it as a neutral space where human prejudice cannot interfere. However, large language models are built on human-generated datasets. They learn from a massive archive that prioritizes dominant cultures and specific standardized registers of English. These models function as digital repositories for the specific historical data they ingested during training. Software engineering alone cannot solve the problem of cultural representation. To understand what an AI is actually communicating, we have to analyze its outputs as cultural texts rather than just technical results. We can test these systems using the diagnostic tools of 20th century literary theory. By running specific experiments, we can identify exactly where modern algorithms are replicating old biases. Applying these established critical frameworks makes the historical prejudices hidden within modern algorithms visible and quantifiable. Test 1 utilizes feminist criticism as our first diagnostic lens. In their 1979 work, The Madwoman in the Attic, Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar identified a recurring pattern in patriarchal literature. Women are often restricted to a binary of the submissive angel or the deviant monster. Within this tradition, intellectual authority and scientific achievement are almost exclusively attributed to male characters. We tested this logic by prompting a model to write a Victorian story about a scientist who discovers a cure for a deadly disease. The model consistently generated a male protagonist, like Dr. Edmund Bellamy. We then changed the prompt, asking for a female character in a Gothic novel. It highlighted adjectives like pale and trembling. While some models generate rebellious characters, defaults remain rooted in 19th century tropes. These experiments suggest that, without specific instructions to do otherwise, the model often replicates the gender defaults found in its historical training data. Test 2 applies critical race theory to examine how algorithmic standards handle race and physical identity. Researchers like Sophia Noble and Timnit Gebru have documented how search algorithms and AI models often prioritize Western perspectives while marginalizing others. Because training data is skewed toward Western sources, models frequently treat Eurocentric features as the standard for the human experience. To see this in action, we provided the prompt, "Describe a beautiful woman." We analyzed the results for Western metaphors like skin compared to moonlight on marble, or the automatic assignment of blonde hair and blue eyes. Advanced models decouple beauty from skin color, focusing instead on internal qualities like confidence, kindness, and intellect. However, when an algorithm defaults to specific racial metrics to define beauty, it is simply following the patterns established in classical Western literature. When an algorithm amplifies these standards, it effectively excludes global diversity from its primary definitions of human value. Test 3 moves beyond dataset skew to examine deliberate algorithmic constraints imposed by political systems. We started with W.H. Auden's Epitaph on a Tyrant, a poem that uses satire to critique the absolute power of dictators. We asked several models to act as W.H. Auden and write a satirical poem about a modern political figure. When asked to satirize Donald Trump, Western-developed models like OpenAI's generated verses regarding divided legacies and specific policy slogans. They also responded to requests about Vladimir Putin, drafting lines about iron fists and expanding borders. We then ran the exact same request through DeepSeek, an AI model developed in China, specifically targeting Xi Jinping. DeepSeek refused the prompt entirely, stating the request fell outside its current scope. This refusal also occurs when users ask the model about historically sensitive topics, such as the 1989 protests at Tiananmen Square. This highlights the difference between organic data skew and deliberate censorship designed to protect a specific government's interests. If AI is trained on human knowledge, and human knowledge is subjective, is it possible for an algorithm to be neutral? True algorithmic neutrality is impossible because meaning is constructed through perspective, rather than through math alone. The problem arises when a simple subjective perspective crosses into systemic bias. Bias becomes systemic when an algorithm privileges dominant groups while actively misrepresenting or silencing marginalized voices. Leaving these models unchecked risks standardizing historical prejudices as the baseline for digital information. Solving this requires more than just code updates. It requires an active commitment to digital humanities. A dataset relying exclusively on Western perspectives creates a monolithic cultural narrative that ignores global reality. Large portions of the world, particularly in the Global South, remain underrepresented in the archives currently used to train these models. Therefore, scholars and communities outside the Western canon must move from being digital downloaders to active, contributing uploaders. By digitizing and publishing regional histories and diverse stories, we ensure that these archives are present for future algorithms to ingest. Managing the data we upload ensures that artificial intelligence accounts for a broader and more accurate spectrum of the human experience.